Summit 2022 by CXO Global Forum. Since morning, we've had some very intellectual discussions about finance and commerce and fintech and logistics. We've really heard a lot of interesting things from the guests so far. Now, what's very important to note is that the show must go on and must involve a banking element as well, which is why we introduce this particular topic of the day with our esteemed panelists. So the topic for this panel discussion is going to be the role of digital banking and in e-commerce, because that is definitely one of the most important legs, the payment systems, right? So for this discussion, joining me will be our very honorable panelists. From JS Bank, we've got Mr. Waqas. From Finja, Mr. Zain Bhatti, and from Keenu, Mr. Saad Niazi. So I'm very excited to speak to all of them. Let's start with Mr. Zain Bhatti. So what do you think is the role of digital banking in e-commerce, and why is it so important?
So, hello everybody. I think what digital banking does differently from traditional banking is that it enables us to create processes that have no weight of the legacy systems that traditional banking institutions have over time, that they've evolved in such a way which are human centric, which are relationship centric, and which hold on to the processes, to the experience delivery, to the requirement from the bank's side. So digital allows us to pass all of that, ability to create that experience, ability to integrate banking into business processes to the consumer side. And that consumer could be, e-commerce, that consumer could be FMCG, that consumer could be supply chain. And that is, I think, primarily what really differentiates, digital from, legacy. So,
Right.
The businesses are already functioning, their businesses have their processes, and the businesses know where exactly should banking come in.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Bhatti. We'll speak to you a little more. But my next question is going to be for Mr. Waqas. So now, in a cash-rich economy like Pakistan, we see that e-commerce is growing, but people are still preferring COD as opposed to digital banking. What is your take on this?
That's a very key observation, but pretty obvious one, because that is the situation in Pakistan. So just to give you an idea of the stats that people keep throwing around, and I have some, so I'll just throw mine. Right now, Pakistan is 37th largest market of e-commerce globally, and the revenue is a mere $6 billion in 2021, which means the buyer and the seller doing the volume of transactions in terms of trade, in terms of purchases, and in terms of services rendered. Coming to your question, see, the problem is it's a vicious circle that we're stuck in as a country, as a culture, as a nation. It starts with taxation. Merchants, people in general, sellers don't like to be in the tax net. That is a huge problem. This makes the industry keep small than it needs to be. For a country with our GDP, the volume of e-commerce that we've seen over the years, although it has increased tremendously in the last 2-3 years, it's in shambles. It's painful to see the raj of cash that we have in our society, and that's primarily because of 2-3 reasons. One is this that I told you, the tax evasion that we have in our system. The other is the supply and demand. We are under manufacturing as an industry, be it small, medium, or large industries. So there's simply not much to sell. which is why agar aap e-commerce ko dekhen bhi, what we have in e-commerce, if you take out the top 10 businesses or merchants or whatever we call them doing businesses online, they're all large institutions. So you'd see something like Daraz.pk selling Sana Safinas, and 70% of our e-commerce is skewed towards fashion, which is not the case when I go shopping with physical cash in my hand with my family, or I'm sure you do. So that is the problem that we have. Third is that we are somehow not connected with the global markets, which means that in the greater scheme of things, when it comes to payments, uh, you see a lot of local players bending over backwards to create that technological need that we have for e-commerce. But what you don't see is the international payment schemes or international payment methods coming into Pakistan and connecting us with that global, that global cycle that everybody's a part of. PayPal is one example. Payoneer has just entered the market. Apple Pay, Alipay, Samsung. You've seen these things just out there in Pakistan. So these things have also helped keep the e-commerce volume overall pretty low in this country.
Right, sir. Thank you for those very pertinent points. Coming back to Mr. Saad Niazi, Sir, Keenu came about with a different kind of financial technology model in Pakistan, where you were doing end-to-end payment solutions for businesses and consumers alike. Now, competing with the regular banks, how did you think this space is operating right now, currently? What are we looking at in the future? What do the prospects look like?
Thank you. So, I mean, if I start to answer this, and I would also like to comment on what Zain and Waqas said. But however, you see, our perspective from day one has been and still is that banks are for the digital, other than being a digital bank, the part-time effort of digitizing the economy from a banking standpoint, that's a very temporary show that they're pulling, but they're not structured to do so, right? And Keenu is a testament. Keenu is, mashallah, now a reality, and it's a testament of my statement. Because when we started, it was a thick bank-led environment, although it was not having any kind of an effect on the country. But through our ability to react and focus deeply by solving one particular problem, and working in parallel with what we're going to do in future, we have kind of proved it to other players, and courtesy us, many players jumped and entered into this area, and now what we call a fintech landscape in Pakistan. So we are right now we are the most prominent, but we will not be the most prominent in future. I'm sure there will be many more coming in, local champions or others, but this is enough to prove that banks doing this as a part-time job will not be able to succeed, right? On the other hand, when you talk about services, when you talk about value adds, there are so many out there. You don't have to pick and become champion of each. You just have to cement your place and position yourself in one of the few. And we, as an entity, did that. Many others like Finja are doing that. I mean, the ability to do mistakes and pivot and do something else quickly rather than wasting time and shedding more blood is the reason why a fintech or a non-banking entity will be able to do it effectively better and can scale it up. The other best part, which probably, hats off to everybody. I have been associated with a bank, and have been a colleague of one of the participants in this call. So I know this, that in banks, people work really hard. But the problem is a fintech has to scale up. It has to attract investment and value. Being a small part of a very big bank, it's impossible. You can't rely on budgets. For scaling up means if you're putting in $1 right now, maybe after a year, your requirement goes up to $10. You can't increase by a margin of 15-20%. A very focused bank would keep on increasing the budget by this magnitude, but You're talking about multiples of tens or hundreds for that matter. And that's how you explode and change the industry and the market and behavior. So that's part one answer. Hope I have been able to say that. But the other part which Waqas Bhai and Zain mentioned, it's more important. User experience, user interface plays a big role. And right now, as an industry and as people leading the show, we don't have the mindset to really talk to our people in what they are. In fact, I mean, we're talking in English right now. Why? Because we want people outside of Pakistan to view it. Although our main objective should be that people within Pakistan should be able to understand what we are saying, right? This is the reality, and this is a missing piece. UI, UX, making it more understandable for common people, because success of e-commerce is 100% reliant on common people who are the I mean, the representation has to be of the people who are mostly present in the country, and they are middle class or lower middle class. So absence of market does not encourage players to invest more on the digital platforms, let alone e-commerce. See, if you do the maths and you look at the numbers, anybody sitting outside of Pakistan would say there are about 3,000 e-commerce players. 80 e-commerce players are the ones who contribute 90% to what is the known set of transactions happen on e-commerce. That's a very abysmal picture. Is that the true reflection of the potential in this country? By no means. But who would come in and portray and put in an e-commerce gateway? I don't think so. Anybody will be encouraged. So in such situations, what needs to be done is the government intervention has to take place. So suppression of cash, as Waqas mentioned, suppression of cash is the key. It cannot happen naturally in Pakistan. It has to be done through government intervention. They have to make cash less attractive, disincentivize the usage of cash, implement use cases which act as a catalyst. Once that happens, you will see a natural growth in e-commerce. Number two, there is an absence of social security service in Pakistan. You talk about any country around the world, the social security system ensures that a person does not rob anyone and runs away. Those are the policing platforms that you already have in place that secures the environment. So you're actually discouraging your people in the absence of any such laws. Why would a person transact on e-commerce, get robbed, and there is no recourse? So same goes for the merchant and the customer both, right? So it's a conjunction of things, but the first step that needs to be taken is the government has to realize that e-commerce is the key and pivotal to the growth of this country.
Right. Some very valid points made, Mr. Niazi, and we've seen that the government is slowly, especially the Ministry of Commerce, is making considerable effort towards e-commerce in particular in Pakistan. We also know that the State Bank of Pakistan just released their own payment system called RAST, which has been an enabler for many when making them financially inclusive. However, one of the problems, and Mr. Zain Bhatti, I'd like you to answer this one, is that for e-commerce to flourish via digital payments and digital banking, one of the issues that we see is that there is a lack of infrastructure. So it might work in Karachi, Lahore, Islamabad, or in some of the bigger cities, but what about areas like remote areas or Balochistan, for example, or what if someone wants to, sell handicrafts all the way from Gilgit? So we see that is becoming a problem where even traditional banks don't exist. How do you think this gap can be curtailed and reconciled?
Yeah, so I think we should understand first that while reach is important, but the sort of scale that my colleagues have also talked about, we have to understand that a lot of sellers are selling in Lahore, Karachi, Islamabad, Gujranwala, Faisalabad, the major urban areas. That's where the market is. And considering the volumes that of e-commerce in this market, digital and electronic payments have not captured anything in markets where there is connectivity, where there is access, where people have Visa, Master, PayPal cards, and so on and so forth. So while yes, there is a reach problem in far less accessible areas, but the solution to solve is in urban centers first. If we crack the problem, which is more behavioral, which is more what Saad and Waqas have touched upon, is where policy needs to be, where policy interventions, more policy interventions need to be done, where consumer protection needs to be geared up. So if I order something and I don't receive what I expected, I have some rights as a consumer. So I think the problems that need to be solved irrespective of areas, and accessibility is not the top one in my view. If we are able to solve them in Lahore, we can take these solutions where there is problem of access, because access is very prevalent. Far-flung Balochistan, yes, but access is in Hunza, access is in Murree, access is in Quetta, access is in Peshawar. So we have Hyderabad, so we have connectivity everywhere. But our problem to solve is more than connectivity. It's more behavior, it's more experience, it's more consumer protection, it's more policy intervention. It's more how the speed of how RAST unfolds. It's the speed of how people without Visa Master card can also make an online payment. It's more to do with PayPal getting acceptability on e-commerce platforms. So there is a lot of ground to cover.
Mm-hmm. Right, absolutely.
One more thing needs to be added here is the local rules and regulations, the chargeback rules, the transaction-related rules. Now, our environment is totally different. As I said, absence of social security in any way. So the local chargeback rules are the key. That is my biggest learning in the last 9 years. We developed Pakistan's first local e-commerce gateway, and we, kind of lighten our foot from the accelerator, because we knew what's the point in burning so much money when the market is not ready. So we are getting compliant, but we're waiting for the market to, be lucrative. The absence of chargeback rules, what that does is, now I'm just going to quote an example without taking any names. So there's this payment gateway offered by a bank. Now they incurred huge losses. Why? Because your installment payment was made through cards of that particular bank, and the chargeback rules were what? You can, for real estate related payments, you can go for chargeback and apply for it. You have a time period of around 1.5 years, and several of the people availed that, got that. The merchant in Pakistan, because there is no legal recourse, never pays back. They also have the right to go and to the Supreme Court, get a stay. And the bank suffered humongous amounts of losses. Trust me, we could have 50 companies like Keenu in that chargeback. So unless you get some legal regulatory cover of such sorts, there is no way local market will ever explode. People will never put in money as a businessman, right? So and behavioral change in market is created when money comes in, when money is attracted.
Right, absolutely. Mr. Waqas, a large part of this also has to do with KYC, where banks are heavily working on knowing their customers. How do you think that can be beneficial to digital banking in particular, not just the loans aspect?
How can KYC be beneficial to
digital banking and e-commerce in general?
All right. So starting with digital banking, it's interesting that you should ask this. A very academic answer would be that State Bank has just made it mandatory for banks to do that. So we have to, and we are doing it now from the bank side. Same goes for all.
Right, but what was the thought process behind?
Right. These are things. So just giving its due credit to the regulator, State Bank. Over the last few years, we've seen a decently aggressive and progressive change in their stance on a policy level. I'm talking specifically about State Bank, not other government entities, because I absolutely agree with my associates here on the call that the government policy intervention is utterly in abysmal shape. But from the State Bank side, what they've done is they've changed a lot of landscape in terms of what we can digitally offer to customers. I'll give you two examples. Digital signature has now become, uh, I won't say legally accepted because that it had been for a while under British common law, but it has now become an acceptable compliance-related offering for customers as a tangible instrument in banking now, digitally enabled signature. So that's one example. And now there are left, right, and center companies coming out and selling that technology, which is wonderful to see. The other part is KYC itself. So with FATF bothering Pakistan a lot, State Bank has taken a lot of countermeasures in ensuring that people can get vetted, can get validated through digital means. So that has also come into play now in Pakistan. The good part is that KYC itself, if you go to the nitty-gritty of banking, it used to be, or it still is to a larger degree, a very, very operational matter that could be spread over 2, 3, 4 days, because there are a lot of different entities at the back office involved.
Right.
But now what we're seeing is you do it runtime, you do it neat, clean, you match it through a centralized process. A match means you match the customer's credentials to a certain centralized database. BI is
Exactly.
involved. You get back and you tell the customer yes, or you tell the customer no, so he or she can get on with their lives.
Right. And I think it also, you know, does help with the risk element. So my question to you again, Mr. Waqas Anis, is also going to be based around, you made some good recommendations in the past as well, but what would be your current policy recommendations for the future? What else do we need to do in order to make sure that the system of digital banking and e-commerce go hand in hand and they evolve together in harmony?
Absolutely wonderful. So I would after giving my particular answer, I'd be very interested in what Saad and Zain have to say, because trust me, if I do two things, they have lesser footprint than these two gentlemen, because I salute entities such as Finja, as Keenu, previously known as Wamsol, because they have been doing things without preceding the regulations. The regulations have come later. They've been doing it much, much, much before it. So that shows the vision of these entities in making possible what banks or governments could not. So coming to your question, there are a lot of future prospects that we can do. One is your e-commerce, trust me, will have organic growth the way it is going. Put it at 5%, 10%. The other is we need to focus on P2G cases. Right now, government of Punjab and only government of Punjab is a good example, who in the last 5 years have started digitizing a lot of departments, a lot of payments for customers. I'll give you one example. Punjab being an agri used to have uh, a lot of hold of आपका जो आड़ती पटवारी होता है. So patwari culture has been very strong. It still is. It will probably stay for a while. But what you do on the rural land is that you have to go to a patwari, or you had to, and take out your land record from them. So that now उसे फर्द भी कहते हैं, mutation होती है उसकी फिर आगे. So फर्द निकालना was a huge problem, and there was a lot of bribery and pilferage involved. Now means about 3 years back, government of Punjab has done exceedingly well in making it digitized under a Punjab Land Record Authority, a separate authority created just for that. People from all walks of life, just poor people, farmers, they walk in, they get their FARD issued free of cost in 5 minutes digitally. And it is a legally issued document which holds in any court of law across Punjab. So P2G is a huge case where we can all play our vital roles in growth. Then we come to B2B cases. So there are, and I'm not going to name any, doing tremendous amount of work, and we all know about them. They have come into play with State Bank, NEFT, with a lot of banks, and they are focusing B2B areas. So business to business is a huge opportunity, potential. You see, there are a lot of cases which in Pakistan, these cases are industries and they've just been in silos in terms of e-commerce and digitization. So merchant financing, payment to merchant is one area.
Billing aggregators as well.
That is another area. So these are the cases I would work on in future. Fourth is I would link Pakistan to international payment partners or players of PayPal and cryptos. Fifth is that we need a lot of e-trading because this is a trading nation, like it or not, but we need to have some sort of national level platform where Saad, Zain, and I as institutions can plug in and help out with e-trading. It's not something that, despite our brilliant record, we can't do it in person, right? It has to be a government initiated or a central entity initiated platform. Similarly, lastly, very close to that, you need escrow in this country. The pain is a lot of sellers and buyers do not, and these are serious people, not people like me who are buying just particular stuff from Daraj.pk. I'm talking about people who are doing mega projects or mid-level projects or low-level projects online and getting paid for them. They need an escrow arrangement within Pakistan whereby I sell my services as a MSME and somebody buys them or utilizes them, and I get a guarantee from a middle party, again that centralized entity, of payment being held in account till both the parties are satisfied. So this is again is not a new concept, but it is utterly lacking in Pakistan on a national level. So these are some future prospects that I would suggest.
Thank you very much, Mr. Waqas. Moving on to you, Mr. Zain Bhatti. Your thoughts?
So I think one of the most important interventions, at a public sector level, is as digitization is taking root in the Pakistani society. In terms of commerce, in terms of banking, in terms of social media, there is a lot of lack of awareness about what data privacy is, and so from a digital banking perspective, and this is also connected to the point that you were making on KYC, is that so we've experienced in Pakistan, it's a big population, and yes, where smartphones are they are becoming very pervasive. They are in every household. The understanding of what data privacy is, what does date of birth and mother maiden name mean, for me, what a password means for my security in terms of seeking help from somebody to help me make this transaction. You'd be surprised the percentage of times we experience this in field, dealing with karyanas, dealing with consumers, educated consumers, but in different age groups, how for the lack of better word, irresponsible because of our lack of awareness. People are with their data, with their sensitive information, and no matter what State Bank of Pakistan does to tell banks that you need to do more and more KYC. What is KYC? If I give somebody my username and password, what can the regulator do? What can the institution do? So one is that we need to go in schools. We need to tell our children. We need to tell everybody. We need to make it part of a curriculum what data privacy is, and how you can't distribute this information to everyone. So over my experience in Finja and also in my previous institutions, I think it is so simplistic. It is so fundamental that you wouldn't even, as somebody who deal with digital financial services day in day out, you would think that this is like an issue which should never come into play. But this is, I think, by far the biggest risk that we are standing on as digitization becomes so prevalent, as e-commerce grows, as more and more banking transactions go electronic, and people don't understand the sensitivity of their KYC and data. So this is going to result in a lot of God forbid, unwanted situations as we scale. So I think that's one
Right.
policy intervention that I'd really like this awareness to go at school. My 5-year-old should know what KYC is, what mother's maiden name and date of birth can do if he just keeps telling them, to everybody.
Right. Absolutely. No, that makes a lot of sense. Mr. Saad Niazi, sir, we would like to hear your policy recommendations.
To start with, and the most effective, and this is how it always works. The government being the biggest stakeholder, they, after realizing obviously that how important this policy measure would be, they would set a deadline. In my view, the deadline should be 2025, 31st December 2025, after which no government payment whatsoever of whatever amount originating from whichever place, be it P2G, G2P, will not be done via cash, will be done through digital means. Obviously, you understand currently the digital payments volume is around, I mean, I've just talked about purchase related payments, it's around 500 billion rupees a year. Imagine that multiplies by 5 after this measure, which is not going to be something very hard to understand and achieve. So if it's just 2,500 billion, and even if we do the current maths, that is e-commerce being 100 million a month, maybe 1,200 million a month in dollars here and there. So, I mean, what would that mean? You take the same percentage on 2,500 billion, and the result is magnanimous, right? And you will see more players coming in, because for a merchant, the biggest thing would be that they get the money first and they deliver the goods later, and they have to get rid of the cash collection related problem, which is a huge cost on its own. That is cash on delivery. So that's the first thing they got to do, and this will automatically boost e-commerce and every other sort of digital payment. It will also result in getting money into the banking channels, reduce leakage, and obviously also have a huge impact on reducing the discount rate, and also to some extent will help curb inflation. Proven very well by Iran, who have handled and curbed the inflation to quite an extent, because there the digital transactions are 97%, means out of every 100 transactions, 97 happen through digital means. I know these numbers by heart because I've witnessed it myself. So this is how it is. The other policy measures would be local chargeback rules. In my view, they got to be implemented for digital instruments. They also need to be that, just like you give Asan Jawan loans on such kind of schemes, Prime Minister Jawan loans. So you should encourage e-commerce players. I mean, they should get cheaper loans. Access to cheaper loans is so important for an economy, for a modern day economy. I mean, everybody knows this. There's a basic e-commerce 101 course that economics 101 course that everybody in university goes through. So in my view, cheaper loans allowing people to come up and implement newer use cases. SMEDA can play a big role in which they could, other than mentioning production, their focus is more mainly towards production, SME related business cases. E-commerce is a business case on its own, right? So if I sum it up, number one, overall environment needs to be created by implementing use cases that plays the role of a catalyst and brings hundreds of millions of people into the digital payment. Include them for digital payments. Number two, cheaper loans. Number three, local rules. As Zain mentioned, as you mentioned, PayPark and e-commerce, very, very important. It's your local scheme. It has to be enabled on e-commerce. It has to have ties with big e-commerce players outside of Pakistan. That's a very, whitelisting again is a huge role. As Waqas was mentioning, escrow via the government. Now, government has a huge asset when you talk about national bank. For promoting your local e-commerce players to export via e-commerce, government needs to be a guarantor. They can pick and choose 100 such merchants. They can be the guarantor. You don't need to open any escrow accounts outside of Pakistan. The national bank can be your biggest escrow. So a buyer buying from US, Australia, West, whatever country, they need to have that comfort that Pakistani government on their back. They are promoting the escrow service. So these 3-4 things can be done, and these we have voiced these things through the Ministry of Commerce multiple times in the last 1.5 years. If all these things are implemented in tandem, I think in 3 years' time, e-commerce can grow nothing short of 100 times to what it is right now. And these are how, as I was referring earlier, the fintech play and the e-commerce play exponentially grows. There is no linear growth or a normal kind of a growth for such businesses. That is how this success is measured, right?
Right. Absolutely. Thank you very much for those insightful comments and recommendations. In the interest of time, we have to finish today's session right here, but I extend my heartfelt gratitude to all 3 of you esteemed panelists for joining us today and enlightening us with your thoughts. It's been an honor. Please keep contributing to the knowledge economy. And ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We've got much more for today as well, and then an excellent lineup for tomorrow. So stay tuned to the FinCom 2022, brought to you by CXO Global Forum.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.